Hey, good morning, team. It is Tuesday, August 27th. I'm Amy Corr. I'm here with Kevin Van Eck, and we are at the Goose Island office. So we've made it 10 days into the new world of real estate, right, Kev?
That's right.
And we want to talk today about the buyer world and a little bit about realizing just how much they truly value us with a little bit of data and stats, right?
True.
All right, so grab your coffee and let's jump into the next episode of Coffee with Amy and Kevin.
Good morning, Amy.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Yes, we're going to use some data to, I guess, instill some confidence, right?
Yeah.
Because for so many of us, for so many agents, this is new territory, whether it's the agreement or it's the conversations we're having with sellers when it comes to commission and all these different things that we have to do now. It's new, but we're going to take a look back into the past.
Yep.
And we're going to use 1000 Watt, which is a great marketing company. You can look them up, 1000watt.com. They put out research, and we're lucky enough to be one of their preferred members. It's a subscription. You have to pay for it as a brokerage, but we get research from them. And this was a big one that we received several months ago.
Yeah.
When it comes to buyers' perspectives. And what they did is they researched across the country. They took a sample pool of buyers and sellers, and they asked them a series of questions, including their thoughts about the value of an agent, about buyer-broker agreements, about clarity when it comes to the process. So we're going to cover some of those today.
Yeah, and what I love about this information is it's actually data received from buyers before the exclusive buyer-broker agreements are now required. So I'll be curious, and we'll come back to you with it later, but when they do a survey 6 to 9 months in to see how this data might change. But what I like about this now and why we thought this would be helpful for all of you out there is we know you are getting comfortable with these new conversations with buyers, talking about your value, talking about your compensation. And so we just kind of wanted to remind you of the lens that they were viewing from before all of this came into play, because it should build your confidence and remind you that you're awesome.
That's right.
Right?
So this was really important before, so it instilled confidence. But as you say now, after the settlement, looking back and just seeing again, okay, how did they feel before any of the changes or the media or whatever else went out? So the first one we want to talk about is the buyer-broker agreement.
Yeah.
And their perception of the buyer-broker agreement, and did they actually sign one prior? Now, we knew in most markets, a buyer-broker agreement was not required before showing a buyer homes and all of that. So one of the questions that they asked the panelists or the buyers that they had asked was, did you sign a buyer's rep agreement with your agent? And this is interesting. 63% said yes.
That was high. I was surprised. That was high to me.
Same. But remember, across most markets, it wasn't required. In some markets, they had to do. They've been doing this. So the transition here for some of you may have been easier than others because you already had this process in place. But understand that across the sample pool, 63% already signed some type of agreement. There is a number in here, a stat here that says 4.5% of them weren't sure what they signed. So when we talk about being able to provide clarity, just understand that sometimes in the past we weren't always as clear. Now we have to be.
Yeah. Well, and the thing too is that 32% that said they didn't sign it. I mean, let's face it, here in Chicagoland, we didn't really offer it up as something we even talked about. So I'll be curious again to see how this number, obviously it's going to be required that they sign it, but I bet there's going to be additional things around how comfortable they are, et cetera. So it'll be an interesting shift. The other one that we pulled up that I, thought was so interesting is, do you feel like you paid for the services of your agent as a buyer, or do you feel like your seller paid for the services? And I know this is something that we've talked so much about with a lot of our agents, is kind of that perception of who pays for what. And the stat was interesting. 61.71% of buyers felt that they actually paid for the services. And then that means that just a little over 27% felt like it was the seller. And interesting again, as we're getting into clarity, transparency, moving forward as the NAR settlement talks about, 11% were unaware. But I think that's still a really strong stat. And when you look at the report further, they talk about how the buyer realized that ultimately they're bringing the money to the table to pay off the seller at the price that the seller asks that is inclusive of all the fees. So, again, a nice number. Over half are already really aware of the fact that they are having to come in and pay in order for this transaction to really even happen. right?
it. So
Same
it's-
thing's happening now. It's just the conversation around compensation when it's talking to a seller and a buyer has changed a bit.
That's right. The timing of that conversation and all this, but you're exactly right. Buyers, 67%, according to this survey, 67% already felt like they were paying for it. So that should give you confidence in terms of having that conversation with buyers, because they likely already understood that what they were paying was also compensating you for your services.
Right.
So then the third piece, and this is one where it really comes down to the value of an agent in a buyer's process. The question was, do you think you could buy a house on your own? And 20% said yes, just slightly over 20% said yes. But that means that almost 80% said no, that they felt like they needed an agent in the process. And we know how complicated the process is. We're used to it. We're accustomed to it. We know how to navigate it because we're professionals. But for a buyer who hasn't been through the process either ever or within the last number of years, or even if they just bought, they don't understand the process. There is value in having an agent. And this survey reflects that buyers feel that way too.
Yeah, and I like that because sometimes those who say, oh, I can do it on my own, are those loud voices. So to me, this stat was just a really solid reminder of they might be big squeaks, as far as what we hear, but the reality is most people, this is the biggest transaction of their lives. It's stressful, it's emotional, it's personal, that they really do want a trusted advisor. So I loved that. And then kind of, to add on to that is the question of what is the most valuable thing your agent did for you when buying a home? So not only do they feel like they definitely need your help, but the two highest, the first one at just over 33% was interpreting inspection and disclosure reports and noting any potential issues. Again, am I making a good decision? Is this a sound purchase? Are there issues that are going to be coming up where you as the agent are the professional and the specialist in knowing what to look out for? So again, that's what we do. That is part of our unique value. And then the next highest at just over 22% was evaluating the pros and cons of the home they're interested in again. And then again, this is comparables. This is looking at, is this checking off all the boxes of what you said you needed? And we become the one that isn't emotional in the deal, and we help them stay clear in making a good decision. So I felt like those seemed right on. But if you're looking at the things you're putting in your value pitch, these are really important to people. So these might be great things to highlight or, kind of announce when you're having those conversations with buyers.
Absolutely. And create stories from, right? We talk often about creating success stories or case studies, coming up with the stories where you were really impactful in a buyer's decision-making process with one of these things, with highlighting what they feel is valuable.
Yeah.
And then to wrap it up, there's huge opportunity here, right? There's big opportunity because it wasn't the last question in the survey. In fact, it was early in the survey.
That was like the first or second question.
Yeah, it was about your past experience with your agent and had your agent been in touch with you. And so the actual question is, has this agent been in touch with you since the transaction? And you already know the answer to this question, right? This is something we talk about. We already know there's a large percentage of agents that don't stay in contact with their clients. So the opportunity for you here, and the number, just to be clear, is nearly 42% of the survey respondents said that their agent had not been in touch with them since the transaction in any way. So where the opportunity is, there's two. One is for you to continue to reach out to your clients after the transaction, make yourself more important outside of the transaction than during. And the second opportunity is understand that there's market share to grab. Because if agents aren't following up their clients, that means that could be your next client.
Yep. I love it. We hope that you found these stats helpful, inspiring, something that gives you that extra motivation as you are moving into the market. We thought these were great. Buyers definitely need us. So let's make sure we're doing a great job. And we hope you have a great Tuesday. Make it a great week. And remember, until we see you next time, you got this.
You got this.